We have a little bit of a unique story in that we both have dealt with same-sex attraction. There are a lot of couples out there where one person has dealt with same-sex attraction, the other one has not.
The first couple of years of our marriage, my level of struggle with same-sex attraction actually was negligible.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Jonathan Daugherty, and I'm your host for today's program. If you've watched Pure Passion for any amount of time, or even seen our documentary called Such Were Some of You, you have no doubt heard the countless testimonies of former homosexuals and their walk into freedom through Christ. Some of these people get married and start families, sometimes to another person who came out of the lifestyle too. Today, we have one such couple. You are going to enjoy this candid conversation with Gary and Melissa Ingraham as they share about their past, what they've learned, and what God is doing in their life now.
Growing up, I believed that men weren't safe and they weren't to be trusted, that they used women, and that did morph into what I would say is a hatred of men. That then later in my healing process, God put his finger on and showed me that I needed to confess that as sin and really renounce my agreement with believing that all of those lies about men.
For me, in terms of experiencing fearfulness or anger toward the opposite sex, I would say it was more fearfulness. When I was growing up, I could be really close friends with girls, and actually all my friends were girls, not guys at all. But if that would begin to morph where she was feeling me attracted toward me, or there was some kind of a romantic overture she might make, that created a lot of fear in me, a lot of just a sense of wanting to pull back and push away from that.
I did have attractions to men, but because I didn't find them safe, I was more drawn emotionally, if you will, to women. A local ministry offered a healing program called Living Waters, and that really helped me to begin to unpack what were some of the experiences that I had that contributed to that hatred of men, and really only then looking to women, and being able to walk through those with Jesus and choosing to trust Jesus as my protection instead of my own self-protection was pivotal to then being open to a romantic relationship with a man. And that all happened right around the same time, near the end of what I would say was a season of really intense healing.
It was important for me to really start looking at what's connected to my brokenness, my attraction to the same sex. What is connected to this sort of revulsion romantically, or a deep emotional connection with women. And the more that I discovered that and really embraced the reality that I wasn't created to be gay. I wasn't destined to live that out. And I wanted to know more of what it meant to be a man. I wanted to know more of what it meant to be a man made in God's image. And as I pursued that, and ultimately as the company of men, as a community of men within one of my more recent churches that I worked in for about 12 years, as the men in that church who had never wrestled with homosexuality had heard my story, and they loved me anyway. And they invited me into their life. They did life with me. They would hug me on Sunday mornings. They would, they just treated me like I was one of the guys. And that was really the first time in my life that I experienced the community of men doing that. Once in a while, I'd experience a man doing that within the church. But as that happened, it really began to set something, or no, a better way of saying it would be to bring something out of what was already there in me, to take the kind of the mustard seed of masculinity that really hadn't grown in my childhood, to begin to see fruit and growth from that. I look at it as though as my masculinity grew and I became more settled in who I was as a man, the fears of the opposite sex really diminished. Both of us know that we're in process. We're in process today. We're not done, or we haven't arrived necessarily. But looking back, there was still some angst in terms of knowing that I was entering into this covenant marital commitment with Melissa, and just, do I really have what it takes? And I mean, so fears and questions would come up. And I think those kind of fears and questions, maybe different ones, come up for people generally anyway. But I really needed to make sure that I was resolved in believing that, yes, God, while God didn't wave a wand and fix everything, that he had me on a journey, and that I was going to be able to be a good gift for Melissa. I mean, that was one of my big concerns. And I got some time away with God. I went away to a friend's cabin and spent a couple of days and just doing some reading and some journaling and praying, and really felt that God had given me the peace and grace to move forward with Melissa. So in one sense, we chose to really engage in some deep and very gut level honest premarital counseling. Everybody should have that. And that counseling really turn some things up and turn some things over and helped us be really honest with each other and with the pastors that we were counseling with, and that really helped set us on a good path.
I had pulled out a picture. This was about maybe 5 years into sort of my healing journey, pulling out a picture and looking at me and a bunch of friends, young adults, if you will, and looking at the picture, most of my friends were married. And at that point, I wasn't. I hadn't met Gary yet. And I said sort of to myself and to God, have I wasted my life, or have I missed an opportunity? And I heard God say, not audibly, but as we all know, God speaks to us, no, you haven't. In fact, taking the time to pursue healing will make you a better wife for the man I have for you. And I got a lot of peace out of that. And it was only a couple of months later that I met Gary. And so while I knew we had issues, I think the premarital counseling was very, very helpful. And yeah, just being honest about where we were at. And frankly, the first couple of years of our marriage, my level of struggle with same-sex attraction actually was negligible, which was a complete shock to me. I figured getting married and the stress of that and maybe the threat of that or whatever would have increased my same-sex attraction, but it was actually the opposite.
We have a little bit of a unique story in that we both have dealt with same-sex attraction. There are a lot of couples out there where one person has dealt with same-sex attraction, the other one has not. And so I would imagine for the one that hasn't, their family would be really concerned about them marrying somebody who has struggled with homosexuality. For us, we really didn't. I didn't have that. My parents met Melissa. They loved Melissa, and my sister and brothers. I mean, there wasn't anyone. None of my friends or family. They were just all excited and really knew that God was. I was in a church community that knew me well. I was very transparent. They knew about my past brokenness and the journey that I was on, and we were all. At one point, I felt like God was opening the door for marriage, and so many of them knew that. They were praying about that. They were excited about that.
I grew up in a religious family, and so when I really started struggling with same-sex attraction, I was concerned about my family finding out what they would say. And honestly, at that point, my identical twin sister had become a born-again believer. And I pretty much figured that she doesn't have a lot of tact, love her to death, love her, we're very close now. But it wouldn't have been out of character for her to tell me I was going to hell. And so I was kind of braced for that response. And that was not at all how her and my mother responded. In fact, what they said, which was so helpful, was, we love you. We don't agree. We don't believe this is God's best for you, but we love you. And then my sister handed me a list of scripture verses, that speak about against homosexuality, which I didn't read at the time. And that was what I needed to hear at that point. I feel like if they had been overly harsh, that would have really driven me away. Instead, it was only probably 2 years later that I gave my life to Christ through an event that my sister invited me to. So there was really an open door there to maintain that relationship with them.
I was really tormented inwardly for a long time as a older child, as a young adult, and it was about 16 or 17 years. I was about 16 or 17 years old when I was talking with my mom one day, and my dad. We were outside actually, and we were doing something, my mom and I together, and then my dad was a ways away doing something else. And I finally just told my mom, just sort of blurted out, I think I'm gay. And I remember my mom, with tears in her eyes, just looking at me and saying, I was afraid you were going to tell me that one of these days. My dad overheard the conversation, which was remarkable because he didn't hear much of anything otherwise. But he overheard the conversation, and he just, we just didn't talk about it. And that was kind of how our family functioned or didn't function. Is difficult things would come up, and either there was something kind of explosive or it was just ignored, and so it was not something that we talked about. And really, my other family members, they found out a little bit over time after I went kind of full bore into homosexuality, but none of them had really had good answers necessarily. But even my parents, even my dad, remarkably still loved me well. There was no open door and the command to leave the house or any of that. My parents still loved me. My siblings still loved me. They communicated that. They communicated also the idea of disagreeing. My mom especially. I knew that my mom was praying fervently, and I think my dad was just trying to sort of put it out of his mind. But my mom was praying fervently, and that meant a lot to me. It was the only thing I held on to when I felt like I'd completely lost myself.
Our wedding was beautiful. It really was beautiful. And we were surrounded by family and friends. We had already discussed, and we discussed with our pastor during premarital counseling, that because of our histories, we were basically going to take, just to be honest, we were just not going to have sex on our wedding night. We were going to take the pressure off with the expectation that, we're just not, it's going to be a long day. Mm-hmm. We were driving an hour to a hotel to then fly out the next day. So we just decided we were going to keep it very low key. And so that was great for us. Mm-hmm. And then that gave us time on our honeymoon to kind of, get warmed up, if you will, if that makes sense. So
I think it does make sense, honey. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, it was very helpful. I think it wasn't as if there was some sort of edict that you're not going to have sex on your wedding night, but we knew it was going to be busy, as Melissa said, and stressful, which it is for everyone. And we just felt like, let's just take the pressure off. It isn't that something couldn't happen if we had wanted it to, but no, we just felt like, no, we're stopping over. We actually took 2 full weeks on our honeymoon, which many people don't have a chance to do. So we were really blessed by that. And we just wanted to kind of take that night and then get away and just really begin to just experience, and be emotionally intimate with each other that night. But, kind of keep it at that until we got actually to our honeymoon location.
In the process of ministering to family members and friends of those involved in homosexuality or those that are gay identified, one of the things that we found most helpful is to get them connected with others that are also experiencing that. And so we do offer a friends and family group, a support group that meets once a month, and we found that's helpful. Letting them know that there's a grieving process involved, that the parents or the siblings or whoever is involved, that they need to recognize and kind of hit head on the loss that they're experiencing, the loss of their dreams, the loss of maybe who they thought that particular family member was, the hopes they had for them, things like that, especially for parents, I would say. Mm-hmm. And how do you establish healthy boundaries while also being loving? And how do you speak the truth in love, if you will? And that's a hard, kind of a little bit ambiguous because it differs for each family. And also, how do you deal with special events that come up?
Connecting them in the group, and then hopefully the group is also making, individuals in the group are making connections, or couples are making connections with one another outside of that group. And just the prayer support is huge. And we've had so many people say that even when they've had other people they were close to in other churches. I mean, most of the people that come to the Friends and Family group or have over time, they're from a wide range of different churches. There are very few that come from the same church. And they have good connections, and many times, not always, but many times in the other churches. But to still be able to come and to sit with other parents or family members that are experiencing very similar things has helped them open up and really talk and feel like there's a real sense of identification, and they can breathe and be totally real and honest. God's desire, God's intent is reconciliation and forgiveness, and those two things are very different, but they can be a part of the same process. But he does desire forgiveness. He does desire for there to be wholeness, and if possible, for there to be restoration. That doesn't mean that divorce at some points isn't absolutely necessary. The partner that is committing adultery, I think we need to know, are they repentant? Do they want the marriage? Where are they at? I mean, so it's very contextual to the actual circumstance and situation, and that's a dynamic circumstance. One day that person may say, they may be brokenhearted about what they've done, they may be willing to get help or support, they may be willing to get marital counseling, and then, a week or 2 or 3 or 4 months down the road, that changes. They're no longer willing to do that. Well, that changes the dynamic. So it really depends on, ultimately, what is that person, can they come together and work together as a team or as a couple? And, if not, then I'm not going to advise someone to go out and get a divorce. I mean, I think that would be pretty rare that I would do that. But I think it's understandable where people come to that conclusion on their own, that that's the right, safest, best thing, even though I'm brokenhearted and would rather have my marriage restored. This other partner is not willing to do that.
So I think when there's a marriage that's struggling, and let's say one of the partner or the spouse that has really same-sex attraction or sexual addiction of some nature, it's important that each person in the marriage look inward and say, okay, what's going on inside of me that I need to work on? And so part of it is, what do I have control over? Because we can want lots of things for our spouse and have no control. We can want them to change. We can want them to be sorry. We can want them to do things differently. I mean, we can have a lot of regret about things that we've done. But we just need to own responsibility for what's our responsibility and confess that, repent of that, where there's areas of either blaming the other or blaming ourselves, we need to forgive and then move on. Blaming in particular really keeps people stuck, whether that's, again, in self-hatred or even blaming the other. So it's about really being open. God, what are you doing in me through this experience, even through this trial in my marriage? And then usually with a counselor or, again, a support group, looking at, okay, why, let's say, and usually it's the wife, I mean, let's be honest, who has trouble setting boundaries, where in some instances, she lets the husband continually be unfaithful or walk all over her, those kinds of things. So then, like as a counselor, really trying to unpack that with her and say, okay, what's going on in you that you feel like you're not worth much more than that? And so again, processing that at an emotional level and really allowing God to speak the truth of how he sees her, in this case.
My view of gender and sexuality have dramatically changed leading up to marriage, really through the ministry of Living Waters and Desert Stream. That ministry took me beyond a belief that I simply needed to stop acting out homosexually, and took me much, much further to delve into the depths of what it does mean to be a man in relationship to, in this case, Melissa, as my wife, and made in the image of God and being an expression of that image. So masculinity to me, I had no clue of what that was about. I saw these cultural representations of masculinity, and I thought that's what it meant. Well, very little of that, if any of that, some of that's just another form of brokenness, kind of in the opposite direction that I was going in. Really getting an understanding and a taste of what it means to be this kind of man, that there is a strength, there is a wholeness, there is substance inside of me that God is bringing to the forefront. All of that has changed my life and my perspective on gender and sexuality, particularly in marriage.
For me, my view of gender, sexuality, sex, and marriage, all of that prior to God's healing in my life, all of that was negative. So I didn't think it was good to be a woman. In fact, I thought that to be a woman meant to be weak and a victim. I saw men as perverts, as passive, as abusers. Marriage was bad, sex was bad. I mean, pretty much everything was bad. and really through Living Waters, and we've found lots of other programs that are helpful, but Living Waters has really changed our lives, and it's really enriched our marriage. And so through Living Waters, again, sort of what Gary said, really coming into agreement with God that I am made in his image, female, that is very good, and that in my femininity, which God really restored, I have something to offer to the other, and that together we can do so much more than apart. I would really encourage anyone watching this, especially if you're a family member or a friend of someone involved in homosexuality, transgenderism, or really any life-dominating sin, to keep praying for them. Don't give up. It may seem like some days it's hard to get out of bed and face another day, especially parents. For friends of those, the world is going crazy. I mean, they are saying, just do what you want. It's okay. And you may be the only person that your friend is going to turn to when they get to the end of their rope, and they need God, and you are that friend that has stayed by them and stood by the truth. We talk a lot these days about how it is not loving to bless someone in their sin and to say it's okay, to tell them it's okay. That is not loving. And so it's actually loving to continue to speak the truth in love, but not to waver on that. So stand strong and keep praying.
And I think part of what that means, springboarding off of what Melissa was just saying, I think part of what that means is that that person may not allow you to stand with them. They may not like what they hear. They may choose to go off and really pull away from you as their friend, as their mentor or whatever. And you have to, while that's painful and hurtful, you need to stand your ground and be that place that they know they can come back to. You know, when the bottom falls out, they need to know that you love them. You're not condemning them. You want them in your life, and they know that they can come back when, as I said, when the bottom falls out. The other thing I would say is for parents, and Melissa said this too, but I think getting a perspective that, we don't want this as parents when we first find out. We want the simple, 3 steps, 6 steps, 10 steps maybe of what's going to fix this and put it back into order. And the truth is, this may be years. This could be decades. And it's the last thing that we want to hear as parents. But I think there needs to be an understanding of that, never giving up praying. It can be really hard for parents in particular if they're wrestling with the question that their son or daughter poses of asking them to come to their same-sex ceremony. And if they choose not to go, and other family members are going, oftentimes those family members will really condemn the parents or just say, look, you just need to go to this thing. So they start to experience a lot of pressure, both within their family and unfortunately now within the church too, applying a lot of pressure. And so everyone is kind of coming around this child that they are desiring and praying for God to break through in their lives and to transform. And they're being supported by others in the family or the church. And the temptation to just say, I'm tired of this. I just want to be in relationship with my child, and I'm just going to remove all the boundaries, remove all of the restrictions or whatever. Not that we restrict our love from them, but that we communicate truth to them. I'm just going to, culture saying it's okay, churches are saying it's okay, I'm just going to agree with that. That can be a really strong temptation. And so we just really encourage parents to hold to what they understand biblically to be true and to find the support they need forever, how long they need it. And then also, if parents can start giving back in some way, there are plenty of people that have a desire to come out of homosexuality. It may not be their son or daughter right now, but it's somebody's son or daughter right now. And that parent can come alongside and love that child. It's not their own child, but someone else's child. Through a process, they can be part of that child's solution, part of that child's connection in the family of God to move them toward greater wholeness. So those are some of the things we would also encourage.
What great encouragement from a great couple. Praise God for His redeeming work and continuing sanctification of His saints. Clearly, there is hope for your loved ones who may be in the homosexual lifestyle. Do continue to pray for them and utilize the resources that are available today. Thank you for watching Pure Passion. I'm Jonathan Daugherty.
Alpha,